program. I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. President Biden makes a fervent plea for an end to the historic auto workers' strike as nearly 150,000 union workers take to the picket line. And this marks a significant moment as it's the UMW's first ever simultaneous strike across all of Detroit's big three car makers. As UN humanitarian efforts intensify to aid survivors of the devastating flood disaster in Libya, which resulted in entire neighborhoods being wiped out and the loss of thousands of lives, with many more still missing, the UN's aid chief has issued a warning. He emphasizes that mental health care will emerge as a significant concern for survivors not only of this catastrophe, but also of the recent Moroccan earthquake. Special Counsel Jack Smith is seeking a gag order primarily motivated by concerns that former President Donald Trump's public statements may be negatively influencing witness behavior. And against the backdrop of escalating tensions between Moscow and Washington over the situation in Ukraine, 2 Russian cosmonauts and an American astronaut have successfully docked with the International Space Station. We kick off today's broadcast with a series of formidable challenges confronting President Biden and his re-election campaign. And one of these challenges marks a historic strike in a pivotal sector of the U.S. economy. As the clock struck midnight, thousands of auto workers initiated a major strike at 3 prominent car manufacturing plants located in Missouri, Michigan, and Ohio. And this labor action comes after the United Auto Workers and major automakers failed to reach a consensus on a new contract. Notably, this marks the very first instance in the union's extensive history that its members have taken such a drastic step against automotive giants Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler.
For the first time in our history, we will strike all 3 of the big 3 at once. We are using a new strategy, the stand-up strike.
UAW President Shawn Fain voiced his concerns during a strike rally in downtown Detroit. He also pointed out that the big 3 U.S. automakers have reported substantial profits, while workers' pay has either remained stagnant or decreased.
Class war has been going on for 40 years in this country. The billionaire class has been taking everything, and the working class has been left scraping paycheck to paycheck, just trying to survive. It's time to put an end to that class war.
Fain's data revealed that the big 3 corporations amassed over $20 billion in profit within a recent 6-month period and a staggering $250 billion in the past decade.
The fight you are waging here is not just about decent wages and working conditions and pensions in the automobile industry. It is a fight to take on corporate greed and tell the people on top this country belongs to all of us, not just a few. And I say to Ms. Barrow, do you have any clue what it's like for one of your workers to try to survive on $17 an hour?
In contrast, car manufacturers argue that they are confronting extraordinary pressures to make an expensive transition to electric vehicles. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden, who has positioned himself as the most pro-union president and faces re-election next year, now finds himself walking a tightrope. He must navigate between supporting the labor movement and mitigating the strike's impact on the economy.
No one wants a strike. Say it again. No one wants a strike. But I respect workers' right to use their options under the collective bargaining system. And I understand the workers' frustration. Over generations, auto workers sacrificed so much to keep the industry alive and strong, especially through the economic crisis and the pandemic. Workers deserve a fair share of the benefits they helped create for an enterprise. But I believe they should go further to ensure record corporate profits mean record contracts for the UAW. Let me say that again. Record corporate profits, which they have, should be shared by record contracts for the UAW. And just as we're building an economy of the future, we need labor agreements for the future. It's my hope that the parties can return to the negotiation table to forge a win-win agreement. The bottom line is that auto workers help create America's middle class. They deserve a contract that sustains them in the middle class.
Car analyst Jessica Caldwell emphasized the ongoing challenges faced by the automotive industry.
I mean, it's definitely a quieter show than we've seen in years past, particularly pre-pandemic, where there'd be a lot of reveals, a lot of press conferences, even maybe a concept car or two. How are these cars going to be made? What kind of cost is this going to add? Because if we look towards the future, it's really expensive for automakers as they kind of push towards electrification, autonomous technology, and now you have some of the issues with labor, and how is that going to affect the bottom line?
At present, approximately 13,000 of the 146,000 workers across these three companies are on strike, and this disruption has posed logistical challenges for automakers' operations while minimizing the strain on the union's substantial $825 million strike fund. However, should contract negotiations protract and strikes expand to encompass more facilities, the cost could escalate for both workers and companies. Potential consequences include auto dealers experiencing shortages of vehicles, leading to increased prices and driving customers toward foreign automakers with non-unionized workforces. And this could further stress an economy that has been benefiting from easing inflation. Automakers contend that they are grappling with unprecedented demands as they simultaneously develop electric vehicles and manufacture conventional gas-powered cars, SUVs and trucks to sustain their financial health.
It's a difficult situation. The union has pretty aggressive demands in terms of salary, compensation, wages, and benefits. And the automakers are working to remain competitive, so they're trying to make EVs affordable as well as profitable, and so they're trying to reduce costs of this new technology.
Concerns persist that rising labor costs could compel them to price their vehicles higher than those produced by foreign automakers with U.S.-based factories. While UN humanitarians scale up the response to survivors of the flood disaster in Libya, which wiped out entire neighborhoods and left thousands dead and many more missing, the UN's aid chief warned that mental health care will be a huge issue for survivors of that catastrophe and the Moroccan earthquake last week.
يعني نتحدث من ناحية جغرافيا السكان على حوالي أكثر من 1,200,000 نسمة يقطنون في هذه المناطق. نظرا لكثافة الأمطار وغزارة الأمطار كل شيء ذهب إلى البحر. الطرق والكباري والعبارات المياه قطعت الطريق نهائيا في هذه المناطق، يعني نتحدث على مئات الكيلومترات الآن تحتاج إلى خدمة من جديد. كذلك هذا الأمر شنو أدى إلى انفصال كل منطقة أصبحت تحتمل على نفسها في الإسعافات، في الإغاثة، في النجدة. ما عادش تواصلوا الناس، حدثت صدمة بيوت غمرتها المياه، مئات البيوت أو آلاف البيوت غمرتها المياه.
The clear core business of humanitarian response, food, shelter, healthcare, but also in a disaster like this, and Libya as well as Morocco, but Libya is going to be a huge issue, is psychosocial care.
The organization's top aid officials said that in Libya, some families have lost 50 or more members when rains from Storm Daniel forced two dams close to the now devastated port city of Derna to burst, washing entire communities out to sea. According to Griffins, there was speculation that some 20,000 people may have lost their lives in the flooding, and 900,000 people in the country had been affected, in addition to the 300,000 Libyans already requiring humanitarian aid prior to the disaster. The deadly storm in Libya and the earthquake in Morocco come in an unprecedented year of climate disasters and record-breaking weather events, from devastating wildfires to excessive heat waves.
What is so deeply shocking about this is, I think in both cases, and they are very different crises as we know, but in both cases it's a massive reminder of climate and its presence. We don't need to anywhere in the world, we know that, we face a really, really difficult year ahead, and government capacities are going to be stretched to the limit, as we see in both these countries.
The opening of a maritime route to bring in UN aid to Derna, which is under discussion by local authorities, could address the access problem for humanitarian workers.
When we talk about the access, in particular, when we talk about the increasing number of affected population, the access to the city is now very challenging because there is only one road that leads from Benghazi to Derna. There are a lot of humanitarian actors on the ground who are trying to provide aid, but coordination is a key in this response.
Although there are thousands of dead bodies requiring prompt burial in the affected areas in Morocco and Libya, the UN Health Agency, WHO, and other relief organizations played down the public health risk.
Dead bodies per se are not, especially after a disaster like this, are unlikely to be a health risk. People have died because of the massive flood or the earthquake, not because of an epidemic-prone disease. So therefore, as such, however, there are certain things, for instance, feces from the dead body can contaminate the water if not handled properly. So this is why proper management is critical.
The mental health strains associated with the trauma were undeniable, however. While paramedics and volunteers continue to work searching for thousands of missing people in the flooded Libyan city of Derna, the International Committee of the Red Cross warned of the danger of unexploded ordnances in this afflicted city.
This is a country that suffered from obviously years of conflict and violence and the ripple effects of that protracted conflict. We don't have a full scope right now in terms of the level of weapon contamination in the area, but it's something that our teams will be looking into because it obviously can create additional risks for communities, for first responders, and as my colleague Bilal pointed out, for those who are doing the very tragic and sad job of trying to recover the remains of those who died.
UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Mr. Griffith said that in Morocco, the earthquake had claimed nearly 3,000 lives. Although the early figures were terrible enough, they are likely to be overtaken by events as rescuers work through the rubble. Within 24 hours of the earthquake, which shook Morocco's Atlas Mountains last Friday, the UN deployed a disaster assessment and coordination team of 15 people out of Geneva and key staff from the region. Speaking from Marrakesh on the ongoing search and rescue operations, IFRC's Benoit Carpentier said this.
We're facing here a disaster where it's not centralized in one place. It's hundreds and hundreds of villages that are scattered in the mountains. Some will be like the one I went to yesterday, 30,000 people. That's not a village, it's a little town. But we're talking about sometimes little village that has 10 or 100 people.
The world is far from meeting its climate goals, seriously undermining efforts to tackle hunger, poverty, and ill health, according to the UN World Meteorological Organization. Launching a new multi-agency report coordinated by the WMO, the UN agency also warned that insufficient progress towards climate goals is preventing better access to clean water and energy, and many other aspects of sustainable development.
Going to meet climate targets and we are not going to meet the Sustainable Development Goal targets either with the current pace of action. And this was a demonstration of what has happened to the emissions in various parts of the world a year ago and from 2022 to 23.
The report, entitled United in Science 2023, combines input and expertise from 18 UN organizations. It notes that at the midway point of the SDG 2030 agenda, only 15% of the goals have been achieved. When the SDG agenda was launched in 2015 in New York, the aim was a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, the rule of law, justice, equality, and non-discrimination.
We have seen 12,000 disasters related to weather, and there have been 2 million people who have been killed in those disasters, mostly in less developed countries, 90% in less developed countries, and there has been $4.3 trillion losses and 60% of those have been taking place in less developed countries.
The report underlines that science is central to find solutions to many of the current challenges the world faces.
We have seen 12,000 disasters related to weather, and there have been 2 million people who have been killed in those disasters, mostly in less developed countries, 90% in less developed countries, and there has been $4.3 trillion losses, and 60% of those have been taking place in less developed countries. In the report, we are demonstrating that with science and services, we can mitigate these negative impacts of climate change. And at the moment, we have a major program called Early Warning Services for All, so that our aim is that in 5 years we would have 100% coverage of proper early warning services, also in less developed countries in Africa and island states.
The report also shows how weather forecasting helps to boost food production and efforts to end hunger. Early warning systems help to reduce poverty by giving people the change to prepare and limit the impact. The need for science and solutions is more urgent than ever. 2023 has shown that climate change is here, with record temperatures and extreme weather causing havoc around the globe.
We have this record ocean heat this year, which is having impacts on ecosystems and fisheries, and it's also boosted by the acidification of the seawater, since oceans serve as a sink of carbon dioxide.
Some future changes in climate are unavoidable and potentially irreversible, but every fraction of a degree and every ton of CO2 matters if global warming is to be slowed and the SDGs achieved, according to the report.
The negative trend in weather patterns will anyhow continue until 2060s. There's no return back to last century's climate anymore. And this glacier melting and sea level rise game we have already lost. That may be a problem for the coming thousands years because of the already high concentration of carbon dioxide. So this it's a growing issue. We have just seen the first impacts, but these negative impacts are gradually growing until 2060.
There's now a 98% chance that one of the next 5 years will be the warmest on record, according to the WMO, and it quotes the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change projection that long-term warming may reach the Paris level of 1.5 degrees Celsius in the early 2030s.
But we are talking about different scales of grey for the future, and if we are able to reach the Paris limits, 1.5 to 2 degrees, then we could say that we will have a light grey future.
The United in Science report was issued ahead of the SDG Summit and the Climate Action Summit, which takes place at the UN General Assembly next week. Meanwhile, the governor of Hawaii provided a video update revealing that the tragic toll of lives lost in the August wildfires that ravaged Maui has been re-evaluated. The initial official count, as reported by the Maui Police Department, stood at 115 fatalities. However, this number has now been revised downwards to 97, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the devastation.
Fewer people have passed away. We still have 31 open reports, and not all of those who are lost have been identified. So we'll get these numbers more and more refined, but fewer people have been lost.
Governor Green also emphasized the ongoing efforts to ascertain a precise count, acknowledging that the process of investigating missing person reports is still underway. He also noted that 31 cases remain unresolved, although not all of them have been confirmed as lost or missing individuals. To enhance accuracy in the count, the State Department of Defense and its team of anthropologists have been diligently engaged in their efforts. Mount Fuji, Japan's iconic symbol of natural beauty and tranquility, is facing an unprecedented challenge. The serene site, once known for its peaceful ambience and breathtaking vistas, has transformed into a bustling hub of activity, teeming with millions of annual visitors, bustling buses, bustling supply trucks, vibrant noodle shops, and a profusion of souvenir fridge magnets. In a recent development, Japanese authorities have also declared that they've reached reach a breaking point. The sheer value or the sheer volume of hikers ascending this world-renowned volcano day and night has reached such staggering proportions that it's now deemed perilous and an ecological catastrophe. Our correspondent Dennis Liu brings you the latest details on this pressing issue.
Japan's Mount Fuji is now facing the challenges of overcrowding and ecological strain due to its popularity. With millions of annual visitors, including buses, supply trucks, and bustling noodle shops, the iconic volcano has transformed. Designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2013, Mount Fuji's allure has led to a significant increase in visitors, with numbers more than doubling from 2012 to 2019, reaching 5.1 million just in Yamanashi Prefecture, the primary starting point. The influx isn't limited to daylight hours, as people now trek up the 3,776 meter, 12,388 foot peak day and night. Accessing the main starting point requires hours of travel from Tokyo, around 100 kilometers or 60 miles away by taxi or bus. Visitors are welcomed by a complex of restaurants and souvenir shops, along with provisions for hikers, all powered by diesel generators and supplied by water brought in via trucks. Waste removal also relies on trucks. As tourism rebounds to pre-pandemic levels, overcrowding and breaches of etiquette concern authorities not only at Mount Fuji but also across other heavily visited sites.
初めて登ったんで、もう普段がどんな感じなんかわかんないんですけど、まあでも朝この夜でみんな頑張って山頂に向かってる時の渋滞はすごかったですね。もう足が止まるぐらい。
People should be filtered a little bit, because some people were not ready to climb Mount Fuji. They were like in really light clothes up until the 8th station, and some of them really looked sick. So I was worried about that also, I think.
Government ministers recently convened to address these issues, contemplating measures to manage crowds and maintain decorum at these cherished destinations.
富士山で最大の問題になっているのはオーバーツーリズムになります。このオーバーツーリズムによって、ゴミの問題、自動車の排ガスの問題、こういったものがすべて、そこから発生しておりますので、ここが最大の原因。
I don't feel it should ever be shut down, but I feel like maybe it could be limited, maybe on the numbers, and it has to be good for the environment, like the people in the environment, the actual people that live on the mountain. It's good for their economy, so I know it's a good thing. But we did mention that there's a couple of sections that it felt like overcrowded.
Mount Fuji authorities have already announced potential crowd control measures if paths become too congested. Reporting from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Liu. Stay safe, for we live in extraordinary times.
Special Counsel Jack Smith's petition for a gag order centers on concerns that former President Donald Trump's public statements may be influencing witness behavior in an adverse way. Smith asserts that these statements have inadvertently created an atmosphere where witnesses feel intimidated and subjected to harassment. The Trump campaign, however, vehemently opposes this request, alleging that it's an attempt by the Biden administration to restrict the First Amendment rights of the Republican frontrunner. Now, this ongoing legal battle highlights the complex interplay between free speech and election interference issues. Mr. Trump has a limited time frame to provide his response to this legal development. He's expected to submit his response by September 25th. Now, former President Trump, who is currently the leading contender for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, addressed a gathering of conservative women. During his remarks, he asserted his belief that he is the candidate his opponents fear the most.
If we stand together in this fight, we're going to defeat crooked Joe Biden. And he is crooked as hell, isn't he now, or something? He didn't do anything wrong. How about the quid pro quo? We're not giving you the $1 billion unless you get rid of the prosecutor. How about if I said that? That's called a real quid pro quo. But we're going to take back our country, we're going to take back our culture, and we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before. And did you see today that deranged Jack Smith? He's the prosecutor. He's a deranged person. Wants to take away my rights under the First Amendment. Wants to take away my right of speaking freely and openly. Never forget, our enemies want to stop us because we are the only ones that can stop them. As you know, crooked Joe Biden and his radical left thugs have weaponized law enforcement to arrest their leading opponent, by a lot leading, on fake and phony charges. It's a phony deal. This is high-level election interference, and it's happening for a single reason, because I'm the one candidate that they do not want to run against. You know, they always go out, yo, we really want to run against Trump. If they wanted to run against me, I wouldn't be in courts all over the land fighting these maniacs off.
Continuing his critique, Mr. Trump suggested that the ongoing legal actions against him would not have occurred if he were not the front runner.
If I wasn't running, or if I was in third, fourth, or fifth place, or something in that category, none of this interference would have ever happened. None of this horrible stuff with U.S. attorneys and the FBI and DOJ. Oh, we're in a banana republic right now. But it's no wonder the far-left lunatics, perverts, and criminals are getting desperate to stop our movement by any means necessary. They are really trying to stop us, as you perhaps have read. It's all they're good at. They're bad at policy. They have no idea what they're doing.
Meanwhile, Utah Senator Mitt Romney, the 2012 Republican presidential candidate and a prominent critic of Donald Trump within his party, addressed reporters. He made a significant announcement. He stated that he will not seek re-election at the end of his current term. And during his remarks, he also emphasized the importance of a generational shift in leadership.
I think it'd be a great thing if both President Biden and former President Trump were to stand aside and let their respective party pick someone in the next generation. President Biden, when he was running, said he was a transitional figure to the next generation. Well, time to transition. David Ignatius this morning made a strong argument that we should see that kind of a change. I think both parties would be far better served if they were going to be represented by people other than those of us from the baby boom generation.
Meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un held a meeting with Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in Vladivostok today, as reported by the state news agency TASS. The report stated that Kim Jong-un arrived at the Kinovich airfield in Vladivostok, where he was warmly received by Sergei Shoigu and an honor guard. Now, this rare international visit by Kim Jong-un, his first since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, has raised concerns in Western nations about potential arms agreements between Moscow and Pyongyang in defiance of sanctions. Speculation centers around Russia's interests in procuring North Korean ammunition for the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, while North Korea seeks Russia's assistance in advancing its missile program. Following their meeting, Russian President Vladimir Putin mentioned the possibility of military cooperation, but the Kremlin clarified that no formal agreements had been finalized. Russia has actively publicized Kim's visit and hinted at potential military collaboration with North Korea, a relationship formed in 1948 with the support of the then Soviet Union. For President Putin, who asserts that Russia is engaged in a critical battle with the West over Ukraine, courting Kim serves the dual purpose of needling Washington and its Asian allies while potentially securing a substantial supply of artillery for the conflict in Ukraine. While Washington has accused North Korea of supplying arms to Russia, the extent of any such deliveries remains unclear, given Russia's possession of the world's largest stockpile of nuclear warheads. Now, Mexico extradited Ovidio Guzman Lopez, the son of Sinaloa cartel leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, to the U.S. to face charges related to narcotics, announced the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. Ovidio Guzman Lopez, also known as El Raton or the Mouse, had been indicted earlier in the year on drug trafficking charges specifically linked to the fentanyl crisis impacting the U.S. His father, Joaquin Guzman, was convicted in 2019 for running what was believed to be the world's largest narcotic syndicate and is currently serving a life sentence in a high-security prison in Colorado. Attorney General Garland praised the extradition as the most recent step in the Justice Department's effort to dismantle every facet of the cartel's operations. Following El Chapo's conviction, multiple sons, collectively referred to as the Little Chapos, assumed control of the Sinaloa cartel, according to U.S. authorities. Ovidio Guzman was apprehended by security agents in the city of Culayacan, Sinaloa, on January 5. Now, President Emmanuel Macron expressed concern over the situation of France's envoy to Niger, who is currently residing in the French embassy under challenging conditions, akin to a hostage situation. Macron accused the military rulers in Niger of obstructing the delivery of essential supplies, including food, to the embassy.
Quant au Niger, au moment où je vous parle, nous avons un ambassadeur et des membres diplomatiques qui sont pris en otage, littéralement, à l'ambassade de France, et on empêche de livrer la nourriture. Ils mangent avec des rations militaires. Et ils restent là parce que simplement la France, soutenant la démocratie et considérant qu'il n'y a pas de double standard à avoir pour l'Afrique, considère que le président Bazoum, retenu en otage chez lui, est président légitimement élu. Comment voulez-vous que nous délivrions des visas ou faisions de la coopération culturelle quand vous n'avez plus la possibilité même pour un ambassadeur de sortir, qu'il est persona non grata et qu'on refuse qu'il puisse s'alimenter?
Niger's military leadership had previously demanded that French ambassador Sylvain It leave the country following the overthrow of President Mohamed Bazoum on July 26. The new leadership in Niger has terminated military cooperation agreements with France and requested a swift withdrawal of French troops. President Macron's stance on retaining the French ambassador in Niger has been supported by the European Union, which has characterized the demand for his removal as a provocative act. The EU, like France, doesn't recognize the authorities that seized power in Niger. Amid escalating tensions between Moscow and Washington over Ukraine, 2 Russian cosmonauts and an American astronaut successfully docked with the International Space Station. Now, this achievement came after the launch of the Soyuz MS-24 spacecraft from Kazakhstan Baikonur Cosmodrome earlier in the day, piloted by Roscosmos cosmonauts Oleg Konedenko and Nikolai Chub, alongside NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara. The crew successfully docked with the ISS 3 hours after liftoff, as confirmed by the Russian Space Agency. Upon arrival at the orbiting station, they will join a diverse group consisting of 3 Russians, 2 Americans, a Japanese astronaut, and a representative of the European Space Agency. This significant event occurred shortly after Russia's first lunar mission in nearly half a century experienced failure last month. Notably, the ISS remains a unique platform for collaboration between the U.S. and Russia, even as their diplomatic ties strained following Russia's military actions in Ukraine last year. And before we conclude our broadcast, we invite you to witness a breathtaking spectacle that unfolded in the heart of New York City. 1,000 drones gracefully illuminated the city's skyline, crafting captivating images of the iconic Amazonian wildlife. This mesmerizing display served a noble purpose: to ignite awareness of the pressing climate crisis. And these dazzling visuals paved the way for the upcoming UN Summit on Sustainable Development and coincide with the city's Climate Week. Let's take a moment to immerse ourselves in this remarkable display. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.